Chapter 251. Xiaoji, I need to use your identity to accomplish several important tasks. Harry was sitting on a sofa, silently staring at the fireplace in front of him, his emotions a tangled mix of feelings. On one hand, he was overjoyed that his godfather had finally been cleared of all charges. He now had another family member to rely on. On the other hand, he couldn't help but worry about Xiaoji, who was still hospitalized. Xiaoji had truly been a tremendous help to him. Not only had he resolved the issues Harry faced with his abusive aunt and uncle, but he'd also trained him during the holidays. Thanks to Xiaoji, his godfather had now been exonerated. Harry felt he'd never be able to repay this debt of gratitude in his lifetime. Professor McGonagall sat beside him, visibly distraught as well. She'd always believed Peter, who supposedly died bravely in battle, to be a true hero, only to discover he'd been a traitor all along, hiding until now. Meanwhile, Sirius Black, the actual hero, had spent 12 long years unjustly imprisoned at Azkaban. The more she thought about it, the sadder she became. They'd all been such good friends once. How had things turned out this way? Professor McGonagall was deeply emotional, recalling Lily and James. She couldn't help but softly weep. Hagrid, meanwhile, was seated on another sofa beside Harry. He alone occupied an entire large sofa. Even now, his mind remained somewhat foggy. After Harry recounted everything to him along the way, Hagrid had remained in this dazed state.
Ah,
I knew it. Sirius and James were closer than brothers. There's no way he'd ever betray James. So it was all because of Peter. 087. Oh, that wretched Peter. I'd love to punch him right in the face. Poor James, poor Lily, and Sirius. I've got to apologize to him, Hagrid muttered to himself. A young Aura with long pink hair entered the room, bringing Harry a plate of small cakes. Harry, your godfather's almost here. You should brace yourself. Thank you, Tonks. Harry managed a faint smile. This pink-haired Aura was Nymphadora Tonks, a natural-born metamorphomagus capable of altering her facial features at will. She could also change her hair color at will. Currently, she favored pink. Professor McGonagall looked up. Sirius should be arriving soon, right? Yes, he's on his way, Professor McGonagall. Oh, and the healers from St. Mungo's have also arrived. As soon as he gets here, they'll examine him immediately. Tonks replied patiently. In truth, had Azkaban's fireplaces not been restricted solely to the Ministry of Magic, they would have sent Sirius straight to St. Mungo's. Suddenly, the fireplace before Harry flickered with green flames. Two figures materialized within it. Harry promptly stood up. He took a few steps forward and instantly recognized his godfather. Though his clothes were tattered and his face gaunt, his eyes still sparkled with the same vitality seen in his portraits. Yet Harry had no way of knowing that just months ago, those very eyes had been utterly lifeless, devoid of any trace of hope. Had Xiaoji not appeared, it would have taken Sirius hearing that Peter was still alive to reignite that spark within him. Harry took a few more steps, intending to embrace his godfather, but hesitated midway. His emotions were a chaotic mess. Long-awaited familial warmth was within reach, yet it felt utterly unreal. Suddenly, he grew fearful, fearing this was all a dream, a beautiful dream, and should he reach out, it would shatter. Sirius emerged from the fireplace and instantly spotted Harry. The same unruly hair as James, the same green eyes as Lily. His nose tingled with emotion. All these years, he'd been in debt to this child. Had he not acted so foolishly, swapping the Secret Keeper role with that cowardly traitor? Had he not exiled himself, refusing to defend his own innocence? He owed Harry so much. Staring deeply into Harry's eyes, he had countless words to say, yet in the end, only one emerged. Hello, Harry. Hello, Sirius. Peter Pettigrew cowered on the cold stone floor. Earlier, the Aurors had interrogated him thoroughly, and he'd confessed everything he knew. Now, judgment awaited him, and Azkaban. Endless dread surged within him. I'm doomed. I won't survive this. Voices drifted from outside the door. The Aurors paid no mind to whether Peter could hear them. Well, any updates? Yes, we've got news. Oh, what's the plan for that bloke inside? No trial needed, just toss him straight into Azkaban. Perfect. That means we won't have to work overtime. True, but we can't let our guard down. We can't let him escape. Upon hearing he'd be sent straight to Azkaban, skipping trial entirely, Peter felt his heart freeze over. Recalling Azkaban's horrors, his body trembled uncontrollably. Compared to Azkaban, death might have been preferable. Yet Peter feared death. He dared not end his own life. Had he possessed even a fraction of that courage, he'd never have betrayed James and Lily to Voldemort out of sheer terror. Outside, an Auror abruptly flung open the door. An older Auror cast a spell at Peter. Instantly, Peter realized his animagus abilities had been sealed. He could no longer transform into a rat and flee. Then, several Aurors hauled him upright. Move it. To where you belong. And no, please don't send me to Azkaban. Peter pleaded weakly. That's not up to you. Now go. Wah, Azkaban. Thud. Peter Pettigrew was hurled into a cell. Clang, the iron door slammed shut before him. He knew this door might never reopen. No. Let me out. I can't stay here. Peter screamed in despair. Yet no one heeded him, except for the other inmates. Ah. Peter Pettigrew. So, it's you. From an adjacent cell, a woman roared in fury. Eep. Peter shrank back in terror. You vile, filthy, contemptible worm. It's all because of your intel that the Dark Lord vanished. The woman shrieked maniacally. If I ever get out, the first thing I'll do is flay you alive. Meanwhile, Death Eaters from other cells joined in, hurling vicious insults at Peter. Back when Voldemort reigned supreme, even Dumbledore cowered within Hogwarts. Yet this wretch had provided intel that led Voldemort to hunt down that boy and ultimately caused his disappearance. Ever since, they'd been locked in this hellhole, tormented endlessly. No, this has nothing to do with me. Please spare me. Peter trembled in utter terror. He recognized Bellatrix's deranged voice. To him, this place was pure hell. The insults continued until late night, finally tapering off. Curled in a corner, Peter whispered, Oh, if only I could escape, but how? If only I could still turn into a rat. This gap in the door is big enough for me to slip through. Yet that old Auror had cast a spell, robbing him of his animagus abilities. Despairing, Peter gazed at the window, his heart utterly dead. Then he seemed to hear a voice within his mind. What was that? He listened intently to that inner voice. Then, unable to resist, he repeated its tone, a phrase that sounded like a spell. Instantly, a mental shackle shattered within him. I can turn into a rat again. Ecstatic, Peter looked up, recalling the mysterious phrase the voice had taught him. Oddly, though, no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't recall that spell at all, as though it had never existed in his mind. Glancing at the gloomy sky and swarms of Dementors outside, Peter bit his lip, transformed into a rat, and slipped through the door gap. He'd assumed Dementors would be his biggest obstacle. Yet to his delight, they ignored him completely. The Aurors paid him no mind either. Rats were commonplace at Azkaban. Thus, Peter effortlessly stole a wand, darted out, and boarded a supply ship preparing to depart. Hiding in a corner, he jubilated. He'd escaped. He'd broken free from that hell. The ship swiftly docked, and Peter safely reached shore. He darted into a forest, reverted to human form, and brandished his stolen wand, preparing to apparate away. Did you really think you'd finally escaped? A familiar voice rang out behind him. Terrified, Peter spun around, and beheld Xiaji's pitch-black eyes. H, how are you here? Shouldn't you be at Hogwarts? Peter nearly collapsed. He'd almost escaped. How had he been recaptured? No, there's still a chance. His eyes darted frantically. He planned to stall Xiaji with conversation while secretly apparating away. Yet mid-plan, he felt his grip loosen. The wand slipped into Xiaji's hand. A simple disarming charm. Xiaji required no wand or incantation to wield it at will. Please spare me. I've got no grudges against you." Peter abandoned all hope of escape. Before this young wizard, he felt pressure no less intense than that inflicted by Voldemort himself. In fact, it was even greater. The timid Peter instantly lost all will to flee. "Had you truly been my enemy, you wouldn't have lived long enough to reach Azkaban. And tell me, without my help, how do you even escape Azkaban?" Xiaji spoke leisurely. "Why you?" Peter recalled that inner voice. "Were you the one who lifted the Animagus seal? You're still somewhat useful to me." Xiaji twirled Peter's stolen wand, stepping closer. "Oh, it's an honor. I mean, I'm truly honored you'd find me useful." Peter humbly knelt before Xiaji, practically begging to kiss his toes. Xiaji needed him, meaning he wouldn't die, nor be imprisoned at Azkaban. Two choices: die now, or swear fealty to me. "I'll swear fealty to you, my master." Peter bowed submissively. "Yet I don't trust you, so I'll add a safeguard." Xiaji waved his wand. A purple glow pierced Peter's skull. "Ah!" Peter screamed, collapsing to the ground. Moments later, he rose again. "Master, no matter what you command, I'll obey at once. For now, hide somewhere. Never show yourself to anyone." Xiaji commanded softly. "After all, I need to borrow your identity to accomplish several important tasks." Chapter 252. Professor Snape lurking outside the girls' restroom. Xiaji remained in the school infirmary for nearly a week straight. Throughout that time, his friends came to visit him daily. Word of how he single-handedly captured a Death Eater had also been deliberately spread by Professor Dumbledore. As a result, his bedside ended up piled high with greeting cards and gifts from adoring fans. Sirius, still recovering in the infirmary, couldn't come see Xiaji. Thankfully, he kept his promise and never told anyone that Xiaji had visited him earlier. Harry, however, came almost every day. He truly felt endlessly grateful towards Xiaji. Without him, his godfather would still be locked away in Azkaban. The Weasley twins also paid their respects. They were immensely thankful that Xiaji hadn't exposed their nighttime escapades. When they heard he'd been hospitalized, they'd assumed he'd been beaten up by his mother, Professor Weasley, which left them feeling quite guilty. Learning that the so-called Peter was actually Ron's rat, Scabbers, filled them with dread. That rat was actually a transformed Death Eater. They'd teased that creature endlessly. Now, just thinking about it made them realize how incredibly lucky they'd been. Of course, the one hit hardest by this revelation was Ron himself. Every time he recalled how he'd cuddled that pet to sleep each night, only to discover it was actually a short, chubby wizard, he'd feel pure disgust. From then on, he lost all interest in ever having a pet again. Cassandra Vole knew full well that Xiaji had faked his injuries, yet she still visited him daily. She had her reasons. With all those snacks and gifts piling up, what if some girl had slipped a love potion into them? That was her excuse anyway. Xiaji dismissed it as unnecessary worry. His own potion skills were quite decent. No love potion could fool him. Still, Cassandra's motives might have gone beyond merely screening questionable gifts. Her wary glances toward other girls spoke volumes. Whenever Hermione, Cho, or Luna came to visit, Cassandra would quietly pull over a chair and sit right beside Xiaji, silently observing them. Throughout that week, Xiaji stayed in his hospital room by day, but each night he left behind a decoy made from synthetic teardrops before slipping away unseen. He met his house elf Nick every evening, handing him a piece of parchment each time, instructing him to have the other elves craft whatever was drawn thereon. All necessary tools had already been prepared by Xiaji beforehand. With ample funds at his disposal, Nick worked with remarkable efficiency. Soon, the house elves began producing countless components, some as large as small houses, others barely the size of grains of rice. Inscribing intricate magical runes onto such minuscule parts was far beyond most wizards' abilities, yet these dexterous elves handled it effortlessly. Their progress thrilled Xiaji immensely. By the time he was finally discharged, 2 rooms enhanced with the extendable ear charm overflowed with completed parts. Concluding that this stockpile was sufficient for now, Xiaji ordered a temporary halt to production. Sirius had now been rescued, and Xiaji intended to have him serve as legal representative for his upcoming enterprise. The finished products would constitute its inaugural batch. He aimed to shake up the stagnant wizarding world with these innovations. On the very day of his release, Professor Dumbledore sought him out, bearing dire news. Peter Pettigrew had escaped Azkaban. This was an enormous scandal for the Ministry of Magic. Minister Fudge, cornered, chose to suppress the news entirely, forbidding any leaks. Only now, upon learning of it, did Dumbledore inform Xiaji. Xiaji smirked inwardly. No wonder the Daily Prophet had remained silent all these days after he'd set Peter free. He'd half expected the Ministry to have recaptured him. The Ministry never fails to disappoint us in that regard, he remarked wryly. Situations have grown complicated, Xiaji, Dumbledore said gravely. A rogue Death Eater roaming freely poses grave danger. Undoubtedly, given public fear of Death Eaters, Fudge's standing would plummet if he failed to recapture Peter promptly. Thus, reluctantly, Fudge again approached Dumbledore for aid, subtly hinting at requesting Xiaji to divine Peter's whereabouts. Dumbledore flatly refused. Xiaji had nearly lost his life predicting the chamber's location previously. There was no way he'd consent to another high-risk prediction. Moreover, Dumbledore believed Peter, weak as he was, would hide after escaping, unlikely to act so soon. Thus, Peter posed less threat than the cursed diary still concealed within Hogwarts. Dumbledore fully grasped priorities. Resolving the diary issue took precedence over Peter. As an animagus, Peter, upon shifting into a rat form, acquired its heartbeat and soul signature, making him nearly untraceable. Searching for him would divert critical focus from the immediate crisis. That was impractical. Consequently, Fudge and Dumbledore parted ways unhappily. Xiaji had feigned injury precisely to avoid Fudge demanding he locate Peter. After all, he'd been the one to free him. How could he possibly help recapture him? Peter's escape is perilous. Yes, yet that diary remains more threatening, Xiaji stated firmly. Professor, have you located its hiding place? Dumbledore nodded. Severus scoured every lavatory. We found it on the 3rd floor, the girls' washroom frequented by Myrtle. Myrtle. I recall her death 50 years past, when the chamber first opened. His expression darkened. We cannot permit history to repeat itself, Xiaji pressed. Peter explicitly declared the diary aimed to unlock the chamber, unleashing its monster to purge Hogwarts. True, yet we've found the spot, but cannot open it, Dumbledore admitted. Xiaji, the figure in the vision, employed Parseltongue, open to activate it. I surmise uttering those words in Parseltongue suffices. He paused, then added hesitantly, Yet, within Hogwarts, only you and Harry wield Parseltongue. Could one of you be the key? Impossible, Dumbledore smiled reassuringly. Remember, a seer cannot foresee matters involving themselves. That cloaked figure was tall, clearly an adult. Neither of you fits that description. Good. Then, Professor, what now? Shall we breach the chamber?
No.
We must remain discreet. I'll devise means to monitor it constantly. Dumbledore shook his head. Xiaji understood. Dumbledore intended to lay a trap. Though passive, it was sound strategy. Preventing chamber opening ensured student safety, while any would-be opener would inevitably be caught. Professor, you needn't toil so hard. My prophecy included exact timing. Next Wednesday night. Xiaji offered precise details. Having paid such a heavy toll for his earlier visions, Dumbledore trusted this implicitly. Xiaji, this is invaluable aid. He patted Xiaji's shoulder warmly. Yet, to guard against unforeseen changes, I'll still maintain surveillance. Prophecies, once concretely foretold, risked alteration. Thus, Dumbledore insisted on vigilance. The chosen sentinel for the girls' washroom? None other than our dear Professor Snape. Upon exiting Dumbledore's office, Xiaji glimpsed the stone gargoyle at its entrance. He breathed a sigh of relief. Thus far, all proceeded as planned. Once this phase concluded, Peter would inevitably stir. Chapter 253. Fiendfire. You really tried to renege on the deal. Initially, when the Ministry of Magic announced that Sirius Black had been wrongly accused, the announcement was made quite swiftly, as this act had been carried out by Fudge's predecessors and bore no direct relation to him. It posed absolutely no threat to his political standing. Yet now, circumstances had changed. Azkaban, the famed prison where no one had ever managed to escape, had just seen someone break free. And the escapee was none other than Peter Pettigrew, whom Fudge had only recently boasted about having captured. The impact of this event was no less, if not greater, than the revelation of Sirius's innocence. The fact that a vicious Death Eater had escaped posed a grave danger to the safety of every wizard and witch. People had grown accustomed to peace. No one wished to return to those days of constant fear and trepidation. The younger generation of wizards, who'd never experienced that era, couldn't even fathom it. Back then, even when conversing with loved ones, one had to rely on coded messages, a source of great sorrow and helplessness. How could one ever be sure whether the person before them was truly a close friend or a Death Eater impersonating them? It was truly a terrifying time. The ministry was suddenly inundated with countless letters, and Fudge's office received several howler letters each day. This kept Fudge endlessly busy, and it also bred resentment toward Professor Dumbledore, who had refused to allow Siaji to help predict Peter Pettigrew's whereabouts. Sirius lay comfortably on his hospital bed, propped up by 2 pillows. He gazed quietly at a beam of sunlight streaming through the window. Outside, a flower of some unknown species was in full bloom. Everything around him was bright and clean. How many years had it been since he'd seen such a scene? Not in Azkaban, nor in that gloomy home of his. Only in one place, James's home. Back then, he'd left home and lived there. Just like now, there was no oppression or gloom. Only brightness, peace, and joy. He raised his hand. 2 scars marred its surface. They were clearly fresh wounds, or perhaps so deep that even healing spells had struggled to fully mend them. Still, at St. Mungo's, these injuries would vanish within mere hours. Over the past few days, his hand had been injured twice. The first time was upon hearing that Peter Pettigrew was still alive. In his fury, he'd smashed a table with his fist, fracturing his bones. The second time occurred that morning when he heard news of Peter's escape. Sharp glass had pierced his hand. Thankfully, Hagrid had remained by his side, physically restraining him whenever he grew overly impulsive. Hagrid, with his massive frame, could easily subdue Sirius's slender body. Otherwise, he'd have rushed out long ago to hunt down Peter Pettigrew. Now, however, he was already plotting how to slip past Hagrid unnoticed. Peter's escape from Azkaban was a golden opportunity, a chance for Sirius to finally exact his revenge. Yet Hagrid's single-mindedness made this rather difficult. Frustrated, Sirius scratched his head. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed through the room, like a whip striking the air. Hagrid instantly stood up, while Sirius turned toward the sound with heightened vigilance. There stood a homely elf with a rather fearsome appearance. "Apologies. This matter requires discretion, so I've taken the liberty of intruding." "I sincerely apologize," Nick said, removing his hat and bowing to both Sirius and Hagrid. Hagrid stepped protectively in front of Sirius, his towering form resembling a mountain. Sirius gently tugged at Hagrid's robe, urging him to relax. "Who are you?" Sirius asked curiously. "My name is Nick. My master sent his regards to you, Mr. Black." "Your master? Who is it?" It was highly unusual for a proper elf to refer to its master as such. "My master is Xia. He said that upon hearing his name, you'd listen to me attentively," Nick replied. "Ah, so it's him." Sirius understood at once. Hagrid, though skeptical, still inquired, "I know Dobby, Xiaji's elf. Yet I've never seen you before. Aside from Dobby, my kind master has taken in many homeless elves." "I am merely one of them," Nick replied solemnly. "What brings you here?" Sirius asked. He harbored no suspicion. No one else knew of his relationship with Xiaji. "I'd prefer to speak with you alone, Mr. Black." Nick glanced at Hagrid. Hagrid, Would you mind stepping outside for a moment? But it's all right, Hagrid. He truly is sent by Xiaji. He won't harm me. Very well. If you insist. Reluctantly, Hagrid exited the room. Once the door closed, Nick cast a spell to prevent any eavesdropping. Xiaji had instructed him beforehand. Should Hagrid be present, he must be sent away first, as his loose tongue posed a risk. As a meticulous elf, Nick ensured this first step was completed. Now, let us discuss matters at hand, Sirius said. Nick approached the bed once more. Do you recall the wager you made with my master? Of course. Should he restore my innocence and secure my release from Azkaban so I could reunite with Harry, I'd grant him any one request. Excellent. I've come precisely for this. Clearly, my master has fulfilled his end of the bargain. Now, it's time for you to honor your promise. Sirius fell silent briefly. Presumably, you've brought my master's request. Yet, I have a request of my own. Might I fulfill this obligation after attending to a personal matter? Ah, as my master predicted, you intend to renege on your word. No, that's not it. Sirius exclaimed irritably. Of course I'll honor the pact, but I'd like to delay it slightly until after I've settled this private affair. My master instructed me beforehand. Should you seek to postpone the agreement, I'm to convey one message to you. What? Xiaji anticipated I'd ask for a delay. What did he tell you? Sirius asked, astonished. Chapter 254, A Flawless Strategy from Xiaji. Sirius Black is stunned. Of course. With all due respect, there's nothing that can possibly be hidden from my master, Nick said proudly. These past days, Xiaji had brought him countless surprises, whether it was those incredible new inventions or his extraordinary way of speaking. All of this had deeply captivated this otherwise unconventional house elf, turning him into a true die-hard fan of Xiaji. So, what did your master instruct you to tell me? He said it's impossible for you to ever locate where Peter Pettigrew is hiding. Rather than wasting time on a traitor like him, you'd be better off dedicating your efforts to more meaningful pursuits. Sirius fell silent. Indeed, finding Peter Pettigrew, who could transform into a mouse, was no easy task at all. Perhaps Xiaji's words were the most objective assessment possible. His chances of ever finding that mouse were practically non-existent. Yet, how could he possibly let go of the grudges he held against James and Lily, not to mention his own wrongful imprisonment in Azkaban? I admit your master speaks the truth. But still, I must find Peter. No matter how far he runs, I'll chase him down and kill him. Sirius declared resolutely, fury blazing in his eyes. 087 I find myself growing ever more in awe of my master, Nick exclaimed, utterly astonished. What? Has your master predicted this as well? Sirius asked, equally astonished. Predicted? Oh. He anticipated your reaction and demeanor down to the very last detail. Even the words you'd speak, though phrased slightly differently, carried the same meaning, Nick replied. Sirius stared at Nick, bewildered. Could Xiaji truly be this prophetic? That seemed far too unbelievable. My master also mentioned that your personality is far too easy to decipher. Hence, he instructed me, should you refuse once again, to convey one final message to you. Nick now held Xiaji in the highest esteem. Initially, when Xiaji had given these instructions, Nick had thought his master was making a mountain out of a molehill. Yet now, it seemed Xiaji had anticipated everything perfectly. Not a single reaction from Sirius had escaped his predictions. It was as though Xiaji had been conversing directly with Sirius, the future Sirius, through him. This truly was nothing short of miraculous. What does Xiaji wish to tell me? He wishes to make a pact with you. What kind of pact? Should you fulfill the terms of this agreement, he himself will capture Peter Pettigrew and bring him before you, allowing you to exact your revenge personally. Can he really find that mouse? Sirius nearly leapt off the bed in excitement. If my master says he can, then it's absolutely possible. Nick now had utter faith in Xiaji. Then can he tell me right now how I can fulfill this agreement immediately after avenging myself? My master insists no. Some futures can be altered, yet certain ones must remain unchangeable. Only by following his instructions precisely will you stand any chance of locating Peter and avenging yourself. And if I refuse? Sirius tentatively inquired. Then you'll never get the chance to exact revenge yourself. Worse still, you might even end up dying before Peter does. Those were my master's exact words. Nick felt a strange sensation arise within him. His conversation with Sirius resembled reciting lines from a script. Everything seemed predestined. How utterly peculiar. Can he truly locate that mouse? After a long moment of contemplation, Sirius finally spoke. I'd have thought that, having cleared your name and freed you from Azkaban, despite the seemingly impossible odds, my master's abilities had already been proven beyond doubt, Nick remarked regretfully. Sirius fell speechless. Indeed, under his previous circumstances, there had been only two possible ways for him to escape. Either he'd have to break out himself, or someone would have to storm Azkaban and rescue him. As for being exonerated and released, treated as a hero, that had seemed utterly impossible, a fantasy at best. Yet now, thanks to Xiaji, that very fantasy had become reality. What reason did he have left to doubt Xiaji's abilities? Very well, I accept Xiaji's terms. I agree to this pact. Sirius finally consented. I'll do my utmost to fulfill whatever obligations this entails. Now, please tell me, what exactly does your master require of me? Truthfully, had you not initially refused, I believe you'd already have known what he wanted. Nick shrugged. Fair enough. My apologies. Go on, what does Xiaji want me to do? My master intends to establish a company. However, since he's only 12 years old this year, he needs an adult to serve as its legal representative. Nick fixed Sirius with a steady gaze. That's all. Sirius had expected something far more significant. This merely required him to act as a company owner. Should I agree? Will your master then reveal Peter Pettigrew's whereabouts to me? Oh, it's not quite that simple. Otherwise, why would I have wasted so much time explaining all this? You must act as a worthy owner and ensure this company thrives. And how exactly is thriving defined? Well, surely you shouldn't even need to ask. The company must become the wealthiest enterprise across the entire wizarding world.
What?
That's quite an ambitious requirement, Xiaji. You must trust my master and his incredible products, Mr. Black. Very well, but why did he choose me to be this legal representative? Because you're a combat hero, one of the most renowned figures in the wizarding world today. You wield immense influence. Nearly every wizard sympathizes with your plight. Moreover, the Ministry of Magic currently feels deep guilt toward you, making it far easier for you to accomplish things as its designated owner. Nick shrugged. This reasoning was undeniable. So, from the very moment he rescued me, your master had all this planned? Possibly. I myself can't fathom his thoughts at all. Incredible. Your master, Xiaji, is merely 12 years old. To be honest, had I not personally met him, I'd have sworn I was dealing with some cunning, elderly sage. Age means nothing, Mr. Black. Some people live to a ripe old age, yet remain as childish as infants. Surely you're not referring to me. Is there anyone else here? Sirius appeared somewhat flustered. Ahem. So, what name has Xiaji chosen for this company? It's called Future. Future? Sirius murmured softly. Was Xiaji striving to seize control of the future itself? Chapter 255, Ghostly Shadows at Hogwarts. Hagrid had been waiting outside the infirmary for over 2 hours before Sirius finally called him in. When Hagrid entered, the house elf named Nick was no longer there. Sirius lay on the bed, his eyes gleaming with excitement. Don't worry, Hagrid. I won't recklessly go off searching for that rat again. Sirius had just witnessed Xiaji creations. They were absolutely breathtaking. Nothing like this had ever existed in the wizarding world before. He couldn't wait to see the expressions on Auror's faces when they laid eyes on them. Hagrid gazed at Sirius suspiciously. He simply didn't believe a word of it. What if Sirius was trying to deceive him, lulling him into complacency, so he could sneak off and seek revenge on Peter. Humph. Don't think I'm easy to fool, just because everyone thinks me dumb. I'm quite sharp-witted. Lately, Professor Snape had been extremely irritable. He was forced to cast an invisibility spell daily, then hide quietly inside a girl's lavatory, waiting. It was utterly unbearable. Most importantly, this duty severely hindered his progress in developing the concoction liquid. After all, the sooner he succeeded, the sooner he'd be able to see Lily. Even if she couldn't be fully resurrected yet, even a mere glimpse would be wonderful. Thankfully, this ordeal lasted only until next Wednesday. While leaning against the wall of the lavatory under his invisibility spell, he kept hearing Myrtle's wailing. This irked him greatly. Suddenly, he heard footsteps echoing from the hallway outside. Snape paid them no mind. Students often passed by here, though no one dared use this lavatory due to Myrtle's presence. Yet soon, Snape sensed something amiss. Those footsteps stopped right at the lavatory door. Could it be? Snape opened his eyes, drew his wand, and silently crept toward the door. Perhaps today, rather than waiting until Wednesday, he'd finally catch this intruder. Then he could return to his office and resume perfecting the concoction liquid. Just as Snape prepared to slip outside stealthily, those footsteps resounded once more, this time in great haste. The intruder was fleeing. Without hesitation, Snape dashed out, catching sight of a black robe vanishing around a corridor bend ahead. He gave chase. Though the figure ran at incredible speed, Snape still made out a distant silhouette, a cloaked figure, identical to the one Xiaji had foreseen via divination. Stand still. Realizing his invisibility spell had been seen through, Snape dispelled it at once. Maintaining such magic mid-combat wasn't wise. Battle now seemed inevitable. As the figure rounded another corner, Snape lunged forward, having already cast a shield charm beforehand. Sectum Sempra. Thud. 2 jagged gashes appeared on the far wall, carved by his spell. Yet the cloaked figure vanished. Snape scanned his surroundings warily. This was a dead end. The intruder couldn't have escaped. Accio Manifestation. He cast next. This spell nullified all forms of invisibility magic. Yet silence remained unbroken. Impossible. The figure had turned down this very path. Perplexed, Snape kept his guard up and swept the corridor with Sectum Sempra. Soon, the entire hallway lay in ruins. What's going on? Hearing this voice, Snape relaxed somewhat. Turning, he saw Professor Dumbledore and Xiaji. Upon Snape's departure, he'd immediately informed Xiaji via ring. Presumably, Xiaji swiftly summoned Dumbledore, hence their joint arrival. Snape recounted events to them. So, a cloaked figure entered this corridor and vanished. Dumbledore surveyed the wreckage. Yet clearly, he's nowhere to be found. Xiaji mused, chin in hand. Impossible. He couldn't have left here. Snape insisted firmly. This is a dead end. No one can apparate off Hogwarts grounds. Xiaji scratched his head. He himself could apparate here, as could Professor Dumbledore. Please give me flowers. 0 asterisk, but he truly isn't here. Snape fell silent. Surely I didn't encounter a ghost. Ghosts? That's not entirely implausible, Xiaji murmured. Are you serious? Snape eyed him skeptically. Ghosts traverse walls effortlessly, Professor Snape, Xiaji replied gravely. So why not? Ghosts make no footsteps. Snape retorted. I've encountered evil spirits capable of both touching objects and phasing through walls, Xiaji stated softly, the very specter that nearly killed Cassandra Vole and Hermione that night. We must consider this possibility, Severus. It seems we've disturbed him. His ability to pierce your invisibility spell proves him quite extraordinary, Dumbledore affirmed. So, you're implying a ghost stole Voldemort's diary? Snape scoffed. Why couldn't it be Voldemort's fragmented soul manifesting? Xiaji countered calmly. Snape paled instantly. You mean, Tom Riddle's fragmented soul, Voldemort's very essence. He'd no idea this soul belonged to a 16-year-old Tom. He'd assumed it was the adult Dark Lord, a being he feared to his core. If his soul manifested, Dumbledore spoke gravely. Then, it's drained nearly all vitality and soul energy from its host, Xiaji finished. Thus, we'd easily locate that individual, anyone feeling unwell. We've monitored every student. None's ailed lately except me, perhaps, Xiaji admitted. Meaning Voldemort's soul now controls someone at Hogwarts, impersonating them? Xiaji nodded. This resembled soul possession, though less mystical, merely temporary domination. Just as in canon, when the diary coerced Ginny Weasley into theft and bloodwriting, upon waking, she recalled nothing. Chapter 256. Cassandra, speak up. Who have you gotten into trouble this time? Now, he probably knows that we're waiting for him in the girls' restroom. So, what should we do next? Snape asked. For a moment, all three fell silent. Perhaps I could make another prophecy. Absolutely not. Professor Dumbledore immediately rejected this dangerous idea from Xiaji. We still have ways to lure him out without needing you to prophesy again. I beg you, Xiaji. Promise me you won't attempt any prophecies on your own. Dumbledore spoke solemnly. Last time Xiaji attempted a prophecy, it nearly cost him his life. There was no way Dumbledore would allow it again. Very well. Actually, I believe this time it shouldn't be a problem. Don't even think about it. The remnants of Voldemort's soul were bound to open the Chamber of Secrets, and its entrance was right there. There was absolutely no way to bypass that location, designated as 087. It was only because Snape had frightened it earlier that it might refrain from returning for a while. Still, to be absolutely safe, Dumbledore insisted on having Professor Snape continue keeping watch there. He figured the remnant's power couldn't be very strong. After all, upon seeing Snape, they chose flight rather than combat. That evening, when Xiaji entered the Great Hall for dinner, he noticed Percy Weasley seemed quite down. Xiaji overheard Fred and George mocking him, saying he couldn't even best Lockhart in a fight. Upperclassmen were also discussing how Lockhart seemed far more confident lately. Classes no longer devolved into theatrical performances. Instead, he earnestly taught dueling and defense against the dark arts. Percy had been called up to demonstrate, only to be effortlessly disarmed by Lockhart, hence his gloomy mood. Everyone knew Lockhart was a fraud. For someone as proud as Percy, being disarmed by such a man was unbearable. Listening to these murmurs, Xiaji merely smiled and continued savoring his meal. Noticing his familiar grin, Cassandra Vole couldn't help but ask, Is this yet another one of your schemes? Pretty much. What did you manage to guess? I can't possibly fathom what you've done. But every time your schemes succeed, you always wear that exact smile. What are you implying? Why would I only smile after causing harm? Xiaji scratched his head in exasperation. Truth be told, Cassandra truly understood him well. Cassandra, you know, my methods might not always be proper, but my intentions are good, Xiaji replied calmly. I know. Yet, with your abilities, you could easily live without involving yourself in all this. No one could ever harm you, right? What Cassandra really meant was, Xiaji could simply stay detached from all this, so why did he bother getting involved at all? Xiaji glanced upward at the ceiling, now decorated to resemble a starry sky, with hundreds of candles floating above them. My motives are quite simple. I simply wish to reduce the suffering of souls and prevent families from being torn apart in the future. I see. Cassandra gazed at him quietly, her eyes somewhat distant. That's indeed a noble goal. If you'd like, I'd be happy to assist you. Haven't you already been helping me? Xiaji smiled radiantly, a smile so dazzling it captivated countless girls sneaking glances at him. His charm level of 10 truly lived up to its reputation. Lockhart returned to his office, elated. He carefully shut the door and took his seat at the desk. The walls were lined with photos of Lockhart himself. Upon seeing their creator return, each photo's Lockhart seemed eager to flash its own charred grin. Unlike usual, however, Lockhart didn't spend ages admiring himself. Instead, he pulled out a black-covered diary from his pocket. Its pages had turned slightly yellowed with age. He opened it and, wielding a lavish peacock feather quill, wrote excitedly, "Did you see it? That Percy, when called up, he thought he'd easily best me. Yet in mere moments, I disarmed him completely. The spells you taught me truly work wonders. I've given you everything you wanted. And what about what I truly desire? Suddenly, words materialized on the diary's pages. Lockhart seemed entirely accustomed to this eerie phenomenon. Ever since finding this diary weeks prior, he'd conversed with it daily. Of course I'll provide whatever you need. No need to worry. I have every reason to worry. Listen, Lockhart, I need another favor from you. What is it? I need you to figure out why that professor of yours, Snape, used an invisibility charm to hide inside the third-floor girls' restroom. Tom Riddle was anxious. He had no idea whether Snape's presence there meant the man already knew of the chamber's entrance. Was Snape lurking there precisely waiting for him to appear? Tom's original memories had been erased by Xiaji. Now, this fragment of his soul embodied nothing but pure malice.
What?
Snape used an invisibility charm to hide in the girls' restroom? Lockhart's expression twisted into one of utter shock.
Huh.
Severus, who'd have guessed the ever-so respectable Severus actually behaves like this? Lockhart felt he'd uncovered Snape's darkest secret. Honestly, it wasn't hard to jump to such conclusions. A single man in his 40s, lurking unseen inside a ladies' restroom? One could only imagine his twisted voyeuristic urges. Or perhaps he sought refuge from the heat. Still, that hardly excused his actions. Relax, Tom. I'll investigate it once. You'll get a satisfactory answer very quickly. With flamboyant flair, Lockhart replied using his quill. Severus, allow me, Lockhart, to expose your true monstrous nature. Lockhart's plan was simple. If he could expose Snape as a perverted voyeur, his own reputation, so battered by Xiaji, might finally rebound. He tucked the diary away, humming merrily as he began his nightly ritual, replying to adoring fans. Within his mind, however, he'd already drafted the tale of his heroic capture of Snape the Peeping Tom. Once caught, he'd immediately pen it down and publish it. Chapter 257, Snape. Listen to me and thank you because you exist. Cassandra slowly climbed into Xiaji's suitcase. She then noticed that Xiaji was quite busy. Inside the suitcase lay a lovely patch of grass. Xiaji had placed his workbench right on that grass, rather than inside any sort of structure. Perhaps keeping his working environment outdoors helped him stay in a better mood and sparked more inspiration. You're here, Xiaji exhaled in relief, setting down what he was holding and nodding contentedly. What are you doing? It's quite unusual for you not to show up for breakfast this morning. Cassandra walked over, holding a pie in her hands. It truly was rare for Xiaji to skip breakfast. He was a true food enthusiast who never missed a meal. In his own words, anyone who didn't eagerly eat their meals must have something wrong with their brain. This is a huge help. I'm absolutely starving. Xiaji took the pie and took a huge bite, only to choke on it, eyes rolling back in his head. Here, drink this. Why are you eating so hastily? No one's competing with you for it. Cassandra handed him a cup of soy milk. Of course, this was also something Xiaji had taught the house elves in the Hogwarts kitchens. Xiaji single-handedly saved the stomachs of every student and teacher at Hogwarts. Gulp, gulp. Xiaji drank heartily, then let out a satisfied burp. Cassandra carefully examined that strange round object on the table, utterly clueless as to its purpose. This is my latest invention, Cassandra. You're the very first person to see it. Xiaji spoke vaguely, while still chewing on the pie. Cassandra blushed slightly. I'm not impressed at all. Yet her attention quickly returned to the object on the table. It was round and smooth, gleaming with a captivating metallic shine. One side of it was flat, and on that flat surface sat a tiny mirror. What is this? Is this another prank item Fred and George cooked up? Cassandra asked curiously. Though curious, she made no move to touch it. Last time she'd touched one of Xiaji's creations, that bomb-like egg, she'd barely escaped unharmed, thanks to the lengthy training she'd received under Liss. She'd managed to cast a shield charm just in time, yet still nearly got blown to pieces. After that incident, Cassandra chased Xiaoji around all day long. This is actually quite useful. I'll explain its uses to you later. Humph. If you won't tell me, fine. Who cares anyway? Cassandra turned away irritably. Even so, despite her intense curiosity, she refrained from asking further. Xiaoji swiftly finished the pie and soy milk, then picked up the round object and a delicate mirror, stuffing both into his ring. It's not that I refuse to tell you, it's just that Professor Dumbledore asked me to keep this a secret. I can't reveal it to anyone for now. Xiaoji waved his hand. I'm off to see Professor Dumbledore now. I'd hate to be late for class. You want me to excuse you again? Aren't you afraid of losing points? Haha, my mom would never deduct points from me. Lemon drop, Xiaoji declared. The drip-hard shell creature hopped aside, revealing the spiral staircase hidden beneath it. Xiaoji hurried up and knocked on the wooden door above. Come in, came Dumbledore's voice. Xiaoji opened the door to find Dumbledore drying his hands. Apparently, he'd just finished breakfast. Good morning, Xiaoji. It's quite unusual to see you here so early, my boy. Dumbledore spoke with a warm smile. Today, the house elves had sweetened his soy milk perfectly to his taste, so his mood was exceptionally pleasant. Xiaoji silently curled his lip. While the old man relished his breakfast, one certain professor was still holed up in the girls' lavatory, nibbling on dry bread. Yes, I've crafted a little device that I believe will be useful for monitoring the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets. Xiaoji took out the round metallic sphere and the mirror. What is this? Dumbledore picked up the sphere with great interest. Clearly, this was an alchemical item. Dumbledore was on close terms with the famed alchemist Nicholas Flamel and himself a master of alchemy. Yet despite studying it at length, he couldn't fathom its purpose. That was only natural. Xiaoji boasted a staggering 10-point proficiency in alchemy. Only Flamel himself might fully grasp the workings behind such a creation. Eventually, Dumbledore noticed a hidden button on the sphere's base and pressed it instinctively. Instantly, the sphere emitted a glow, then quieted down, slowly rising into the air before vanishing entirely. Even though it disappeared, Dumbledore still sensed its presence. A thin thread of magic linked him to the sphere. And through that thread he could control its movements. Up, down, left, right. Dumbledore had grasped some of its functions, but remained uncertain of its overall purpose. If that were all, it'd merely be a fascinating toy, yet he doubted Xiaoji had come to him solely to show off a toy. Professor, please look at this. Xiaoji propped up the mirror in front of Dumbledore. Dumbledore's eyes instantly lit up. The mirror displayed the interior of the headmaster's office. Judging by the angle, the view came from directly above the ceiling. Dumbledore suddenly understood. The silver sphere had been hidden precisely on the ceiling. This sphere was essentially a controllable, invisible camera. Of course, Dumbledore had no concept of cameras, so he found it utterly fascinating. Ah, this is truly brilliant, Dumbledore exclaimed. If we position this sphere inside that lavatory and hide it there, we'll be able to monitor the chamber's entrance far more discreetly. He was thoroughly impressed. Voldemort's fragmented soul could sense Snape's presence and effortlessly pierce through his disillusionment charm. Strictly speaking, Snape's vigilance had largely become pointless. He served merely as an alarm system now. Yet with this sphere, they could monitor the area remotely. Voldemort's fragmented soul would hardly notice an inanimate object. Once it relaxed its guard and assumed no danger existed, it would inevitably reveal itself again. At that point, Dumbledore could simply apparate straight there and capture it. As headmaster, Dumbledore could apparate within Hogwarts, so remote monitoring ensured he'd reach the scene instantly. Only if Tom employs disillusionment charm, Dumbledore voiced his concern. I anticipated that as well. Xiaoji smiled and cast a disillusionment charm on himself. His figure vanished completely. Even Dumbledore struggled to locate him. Oh, what a marvelous disillusionment charm. Dumbledore marveled. Only a handful of wizards in the world could cast a disillusionment charm even Dumbledore couldn't detect. This boy, truly, he'd never encountered a prodigy quite like him. Perhaps Xiaji truly was Merlin reborn? No. Even Merlin at this age wouldn't possess such magical prowess. Professor, please look at the mirror. Xiaji's voice echoed from thin air. Dumbledore refocused on the mirror and noticed something astonishing. Beneath the lens, the previously invisible Xiaji appeared as a distinct red silhouette. This is... I've added a magic detection function to this camera, or rather, I call it a camera. It can detect anything possessing magic. As far as I know, ghosts possess magic too, so this should work on fragmented souls as well. Xiaji dispelled his spell. Thus, even if that thing turns invisible, this camera will expose its tricks. Xiaji spoke matter-of-factly. This is truly... Dumbledore gazed at the device, utterly speechless, unable to find words to praise Xiaji's ingenuity. Oh, Professor, this idea wasn't entirely my own. I modeled it after Muggle infrared cameras, Xiaji shrugged. He had no idea whether Muggles had invented such devices yet, but that didn't stop him from boasting. After all, Dumbledore knew nothing of cameras, so he'd never call him out on it. Muggle technology? Dumbledore guided the sphere downward. Like that computer in the library? Exactly. Muggle technology can be quite wondrous too, Professor. I believe that if Muggle technology keeps advancing, it might one day rival even magic itself. Xiaji glanced at Dumbledore cautiously. This was his subtle test. He wanted to gauge whether Dumbledore opposed the fusion of magic and technology. Dumbledore cast him a meaningful glance. Well, you see, the Ministry of Magic has a law called the Statute of Secrecy. It was crafted by Arthur Weasley, father of your friend Ron. The Ministry restricts Muggle tech modifications precisely to prevent such devices from leaking into the Muggle world and harming them. Ah. So, Professor, you disapprove of modifying Muggle creations. Xiaji, voice faltered slightly. Me? Oh. This may sound disrespectful toward the Ministry, but in truth, as long as modifications serve to improve lives, there's no reason to forbid them. What must be banned are malicious alterations, like those clockwork creatures that bite people, for instance. Dumbledore shrugged. Muggles actually possess far greater imagination and creativity than we do, seeing as they lack all our convenient magic to aid them. Upon hearing this, Xiaji and Dumbledore shared a knowing smile. I'm certain Professor Snape will express his gratitude to you in person. Dumbledore spoke warmly. Hee, Xiaji offered a polite chuckle. Snape, that proud, aloof man, actually thanking him to his face? That'd only happen if Lily Potter were resurrected on the spot. Chapter 258. Xiaji, I wonder whether I should choose durian or a washboard. How troublesome. Snape's mood remained as foul as ever. Anyone forced to spend an entire day in a deserted girl's lavatory, constantly enduring the neurotic sobbing and muttering of a ghost, would hardly be in a good mood. Snape felt he was wasting his time here. Not only had he lost precious hours that could have been spent studying dark liquids, but his actual duties, teaching potions, were also being severely neglected. The students had been told that their potions professor was away on official business and wouldn't return until the following week. Naturally, Harry and the others relished this rare period of peace, a free period without the ever-present presence of that grumpy old bat, Snape. In fact, they sincerely hoped he'd never come back. Snape, meanwhile, longed to leave this cursed place. There was an even deeper reason. He harbored deep fear of that man. Even though only a mere wisp of a soul remained of him now, Snape still trembled at the thought. He switched his wand to his other hand, then wiped his now sweaty right hand vigorously against his robe. He had no idea whether he'd be able to keep his composure when finally facing that man face to face. Right now, he felt both conflicted and nervous. On one hand, he wanted that man to appear quickly so Professor Dumbledore could resolve the issue at once, allowing Snape to leave. On the other hand, he sincerely wished Voldemort would never show up. He simply lacked the confidence and courage to stand before him. Suddenly, Snape felt the ring hidden on his finger grow slightly warm. He channeled a bit of magic into it, and instantly a message appeared in his mind. Moments later, Snape's eyes widened in astonishment. It was a message from Dumbledore instructing him to withdraw. Dumbledore stated that Xiaoji had found a suitable replacement for him. In other words, Snape was free to go wherever he pleased. A wave of relief washed over Snape. The thought of not having to confront that man lifted his spirits immensely. He was terrified of dying. After all, he remembered Xiaoji's words clearly. You must absolutely preserve your life. Don't go meeting death before you get to see Lily again. He couldn't afford to lose this chance to reunite with Lily. He'd waited so many years for it. Still, he found it somewhat unusual that Dumbledore suddenly ordered him back to rest. That old man usually relished exploiting Snape to the fullest. Snape exited the lavatory, and upon ensuring no one was around in the hallway, he dispelled his disillusionment charm. He straightened his robes and hurried off toward the headmaster's office. He remained deeply curious as to how Xiaoji had managed to extricate him from this predicament. Back in the headmaster's office, Xiaoji and Dumbledore had reached agreement on who should monitor the lavatory. Initially, Dumbledore had intended to keep exploiting Snape's abilities by having him return to the task. Yet Xiaoji, emphasizing the need to avoid disrupting Snape's regular teaching duties, enthusiastically recommended his two house elves, Dobby and Nick. Xiaoji now had quite a few house elves at his service. Ever since halting production of magical components, these idle creatures had been endlessly cleaning his residence. With nothing else to do, they found life utterly unbearable. As a result, Dobby now struggled even to secure a single chore at home. Thus, assigning him and Nick to monitor the lavatory posed absolutely no problem. The house was already perfectly cared for by the others. Even the dragon, Norberta, was pampered by dozens of house elves, living out a life of pure luxury, like some rich aristocrat. Xiaoji summoned the two elves and arranged for them to work in shifts, ensuring the lavatory remained under constant surveillance 24 hours a day. Should anyone enter, they'd immediately relay the information to both Xiaoji and Dumbledore. Thanks to the rings Xiaoji had given them, communication proved swift and seamless. Consequently, Dumbledore approved Xiaoji's proposal. Naturally, the house elves readily agreed to fulfill this duty. Dumbledore assigned them an empty classroom near his office. At the start of their shift, Dobby, on daytime duty, stared intently at the lavatory with eyes as large as tennis balls, displaying exemplary diligence. Nick, meanwhile, rested nearby, determined to remain fully alert for his nighttime watch. When Snape later learned that his early release was thanks to Xiaoji's intervention, he concocted some flimsy excuse and promptly waived all of Xiaoji's potions homework for the term. Xiaoji felt slightly disappointed. He'd half expected Snape to gift him a few Felix Felicis potions. Still, no homework at all suited him just fine. To Snape, a fellow whose potions expertise surpassed his own, homework seemed utterly unnecessary. It was merely a polite gesture on his part. Yet, upon reflecting that Xiaoji excelled not only in potions but also in alchemy, Snape couldn't help but feel profound awe. After all, Xiaoji was merely a second-year student, just 12 years old. How could he possibly devote enough time to mastering such complex disciplines? Only one explanation seemed plausible. Xiaoji was an unparalleled prodigy. Otherwise, how else could one account for such staggering achievements at such a tender age? If he was already this formidable now, what unimaginable feats might he accomplish as an adult? The sheer possibility left Snape speechless. His faith in Lily's resurrection grew ever stronger. Yet, for Snape, the idea of verbally thanking Xiaoji face-to-face remained utterly inconceivable at this stage. Hermione frowned at Xiaoji. Ever since she'd begun working on her potions homework, he'd been endlessly showing off his own prowess right beside her. She couldn't comprehend why Professor Snape had waived his homework entirely. Without doing any assignments, how can one truly absorb the knowledge? She mused, deeply dissatisfied. Unlike Cassandra, Hermione lacked any first-hand experience of Xiaoji's unparalleled skill. Hermione, this part's incorrect. You must first drain the liquid before placing it in the cauldron. And here, crushing this ingredient with a knife instead of slicing it yields far more juice. Xiaoji pointed at her parchment. offering precise corrections. But the textbook states otherwise. Blindly trusting books is worse than having none at all, Hermione. Hermione scowled, tempted to kick him. You should trust me. When have I ever been wrong? I must complete this independently, Xiaji. Please leave me be, she sighed exasperatedly. Though Xiaji's grades surpassed hers, she trusted his advice. Yet true growth demanded personal effort. Well, I believe following my instructions would still teach you much. Knowledge isn't merely rote memorization. One must adapt it flexibly, or you'll become a mere bookworm, he replied gently. Oh, very well. Reluctantly, Hermione conceded. Under his guidance, she indeed absorbed numerous novel techniques. Where on earth did you learn all these peculiar methods? They're absent from any textbook, she exclaimed, flipping through her potions tome. Here. Xiaji handed her a notebook with feigned modesty. This contains Professor Snape's exclusive potions notes. I only share them with those I deem worthy. Oh, truly? This is marvelous. Thrilled, Hermione snatched it up. Snape's own notes promised invaluable insight. Given Xiaji's unparalleled rapport with Snape, a Gryffindor who consistently earned perfect scores, this seemed entirely logical. Watching silently, Cassandra discreetly messaged Xiaji. Why not simply tell her these are your own notes? Hermione knows nothing of my true skill level. Attributing them to Snape ensures she values them more, he replied instantly. Humph. You truly care for Hermione, don't you? I care for everyone equally, Xiaji replied, flashing innocent eyes at her. I care for Luna, Cho. Ah. Wait, that Hufflepuff girl Hannah Abbott seems to garner your attention too. Sensing Cassandra preparing to enumerate more names, Xiaji hurriedly added, Of course, I also care deeply for Harry, Ron, Neville, Cedric. Is that so? Absolutely. A true rogue, Cassandra declared, rising to depart the library. Huh? What's wrong with Cassandra? Hermione glanced up from her notes, bewildered by Cassandra's abrupt exit. She'd perceived nothing of their conversation, conducted purely via ring. Oh, nothing much. Just her usual petulance. Xiaji smiled nonchalantly. It's nothing serious. She'll calm down by tomorrow. Though outwardly cheerful, he secretly fretted over locating durians. Today, he had a vital mission, heading to that third-floor girls' lavatory to confront the vile, perverted peeping Tom, Professor Snape. He checked his gear, gripped his wand concealed within his robes, and strode forth from his office, brimming with anticipation. Chapter 259, Xiaji Analysis. This is just Tom testing the waters. Lockhart walked along, daydreaming about what dashing pose he'd assume when dragging Snape to Dumbledore's office right in front of the entire school. He'd always been excessively confident. Even back when he was utterly incompetent, he'd dared to challenge Professor Flitwick to a duel. And now, after learning a few tricks from the diary, his confidence had only grown. Thanks to the butterfly effect caused by Xiaji, Snape hadn't yet beaten him up. Thus, in Lockhart's eyes, how could some bookish nerd obsessed with potions possibly be skilled at dueling? Lockhart felt his abilities had improved tremendously. Taking down this studious dweeb should be effortless. Filled with self-assurance, he made his way to the third floor of the castle. According to the diary, Snape was hiding in a girl's lavatory on this floor using an disillusionment charm. Yet this time, for some reason, the diary refused to witness Professor Lockhart's glorious resurgence. It chose to stay behind in his office. What a cowardly diary. It was daytime now, so Dobby was on duty. Dobby stared intently at the mirror, utterly focused, not even blinking. Suddenly, he jolted upright. Oh! Quickly informed Professor Dumbledore and Mr. Summers. Someone's broken into the lavatory. Dobby shrieked. Nick had been snoozing on a small bed nearby. Upon hearing Dobby's cries, he sprang up at once. You keep watch over him. I'll inform the boss and Professor Dumbledore. Snape was currently teaching class. Today, we're brewing a magic-enhancing potion. When your magical energy runs completely dry, this potion can effectively restore it. Snape spoke slowly and deliberately in his signature tone. Below him, The Gryffindor students huddled their heads down like startled quails. If they didn't stay low-key, Snape would definitely deduct points mercilessly. Just as all Gryffindors shrank back, hoping the old bat wouldn't notice them, Xiaji suddenly raised his right hand high. Snape's voice ceased instantly. Dead silence descended upon the gloomy classroom. Summers, do you have any questions? Or perhaps some unique insights regarding the recipe I just described? Snape's expression darkened. He absolutely despised having his lessons interrupted. Nearby, Slytherin students watched Xiaji with glee, daring to bother Snape at such a moment. Even with excellent potions grades, Xiaji would surely suffer under Snape's wrath. Yet they didn't realize that though Snape disliked interruptions, his latter remark was sincere. Knowing Xiaji's skill level, he genuinely believed the boy might offer valuable perspectives on the recipe. Hermione and Harry watched anxiously. They had no idea why Xiaji acted so boldly. He was clearly heading for trouble. Only Cassandra remained calm. She knew he'd never do anything to put himself at a disadvantage. Professor, I need to use the restroom. Silence returned to the classroom. Harry and Neville gaped in shock. Good heavens, did this guy even know how to spell death? Snape's lip twitched slightly. He was furious, yet, well, what are you waiting for? Planning to relieve yourself right here? Under everyone's stunned gazes, Xiaji calmly exited the room. Snape hadn't punished him at all. This defied logic. It wasn't magical whatsoever. Had the sun somehow risen from the west today? Or had someone substituted Snape using a polyjuice potion? Yet what followed made Harry realize Snape was still utterly himself. Because, Potter, do you also need the restroom? Snape's gaze shifted to Harry. And no, Professor. Then why aren't you jotting down what I've just said? Since you weren't paying attention, Gryffindor loses 5 points. Harry wished he could slap himself. Why had he raised his hand so high? Clearly, Snape was taking out his frustration on Harry, though inexplicably, he dared not anger Xiaji. Shaking off this absurd thought, Harry frantically copied down Snape's key points. There was no way Snape wouldn't dare confront Xiaji. I'm overthinking this, Harry thought. Xiaji hurried out of the classroom, operated outside a monitoring classroom, then pushed the door open. Dumbledore was already there, gazing solemnly at the mirror. Oh, Mr. Summers. Dobby spotted that sneaky fellow. Dobby exclaimed excitedly. Excellent work, Dobby. Oh, that's simply what Dobby ought to do. Dobby feels so glad to help a friend, Dobby replied proudly. Thank you, Dobby. Xiaji turned to the mirror, instantly spotting Lockhart, dressed flamboyantly, peeking furtively into the girls' lavatory. Professor? Xiaji called softly to Dumbledore. You've arrived too? Dumbledore smiled warmly. So, what's your assessment? I believe, Xiaji paused thoughtfully. We shouldn't act now. We must wait a bit longer. Oh, care to explain why? Dumbledore asked with a grin. That man encountered Snape earlier in the chamber. Hence, he likely won't dare return so soon to check. Even if we capture Lockhart now, we won't find the diary on him. Crucially, the diary now possesses manifestation abilities. It can move on its own. So even capturing Lockhart won't reveal its whereabouts. It'd flee at the first sign of danger. Thus, I suspect Lockhart's merely a scout sent by the diary's master. The true master is probably lurking nearby, observing. Therefore, I advise against arresting Lockhart now. Letting him leave will lull his master into thinking Snape's hiding here was pure coincidence, not a deliberate trap. Dumbledore nodded approvingly after hearing this. Precisely my thoughts. Dumbledore felt profoundly satisfied with Xiaji now. Raw power alone wasn't enough. One needed keen intellect to achieve greatness. Initially, he'd worried Xiaji might lose his composure amidst such power, but now. Yet we've gained something valuable, Xiaji added gently. At least we know who likely holds the diary now. Rumor has it Lockhart's teaching improved remarkably lately. This strongly implies he's the diary's new host. Tom, he truly had the potential to be a great wizard. What a pity, Dumbledore sighed sadly. Thankfully, Xiaji wasn't such a person. No wonder Dumbledore lamented so. Even a dunce like Lockhart showed improvement under his guidance. Tom's abilities must have been extraordinary. Outside the third-floor girls' lavatory, in a shadowed corner of the ceiling, a slightly distorted wisp of air hovered there. Tom held his breath, watching nervously as Lockhart entered the lavatory. He stood ready to flee. Should Dumbledore apparate here, he'd abandon Lockhart at once. Yet minutes passed with no disturbances. No one passed along the corridor. Had that earlier incident truly been an accident? Tom wondered. Why had that professor hidden here? Was he truly just a pervert? That'd explain why he'd chased Tom furiously after being caught. But that didn't quite fit. Even if Snape were a pervert, this lavatory had been abandoned for ages, haunted by a ghost. No one ever used it. Why'd Snape hide here? Tom puzzled over this. Something felt off. Suddenly, Moaning Myrtle's shrieks and Lockhart's panicked excuses rang out. Teach this idiot. He didn't even use disillusionment charm, Tom muttered scornfully before drifting away. He had no interest in cleaning up Lockhart's mess. Furious, Lockhart fled back to his office. All his earlier bravado vanished. His hair and robes, once immaculate, were now disheveled. Myrtle trailed him, hurling insults, calling him a pervert who'd sneaked into the girls' lavatory. Humiliated, Lockhart slipped on the stairs midway. "This is all your fault." Lockhart yanked the diary from his drawer. "Didn't you say Snape was in that lavatory?" He was livid. This was meant to be his grand comeback, yet ended in utter disgrace. Now the whole school knew he was a peeping Tom. "How do you know Snape wasn't there?" The diary replied. "Of course he wasn't. All I saw was that damned ghost." Lockhart roared. "You saw through Snape's disillusionment charm? Why didn't you use a revealing charm to verify?" Lockhart faltered. He couldn't admit his weakness in such spells. Chapter 260. Siagi, everything is under my control. The diary showed no mercy toward Lockhart, continuing to display new lines of text. Additionally, all I asked of you was to investigate why Snape appeared there. I never insisted that Snape was definitely inside. I imagine when you went in to investigate, you refrained from using both the revealing charm and the disillusionment charm, correct? If you'd used disillusionment, how could the ghost possibly have noticed you? So, the fact that you've returned looking disheveled and humiliated is entirely your own fault. It has nothing to do with me. Lockhart never imagined that one day, a mere diary would leave him utterly speechless, a diary belonging to a best-selling novelist like himself. "All right, very well," Lockhart grumbled, plopping down onto a seat. "I promised you, and I've already given it to you. Now, have you fulfilled your promise to me?" New text appeared on the diary's pages. "Oh, you mean those materials? Of course. I've fully prepared them. They've already arrived and are just waiting for me to pick them up." Lockhart nodded eagerly, his right hand instinctively reaching toward the wand strapped to his back. This diary had taught him numerous spells. Now, however, it served no further purpose. All he needed to do was cast Obliviate on it, and the diary would forget everything. With such thoughts in mind, Lockhart resolved to turn on the diary at once. "So, you never intended to prepare those promised materials, did you?" Lockhart's eyes widened in shock. These words didn't appear on paper, they came forth as actual speech. The diary was speaking. "No, that's impossible. I've already prepared them." Lockhart gripped his wand tightly, ready to draw it at any moment. "Do not attempt to lie to me." A thick plume of black smoke erupted from the diary, shooting straight toward Lockhart's face. Lockhart froze in terror. Despite his usual ineptitude, he was utterly stunned by this sight. Had he possessed even a fraction of the bravery exhibited by his fictional persona, he might have reacted swiftly enough to dodge. Whoosh! The smoke struck his face and vanished into his skull. "Ah!" Lockhart clutched his head, writhing in agony on the floor. His wand slipped from his grasp, clattering against the wall. In the surrounding photographs, images of Lockhart cowered at the edges of their frames, peering out in fear. Moments later, Lockhart ceased thrashing. He shook his head, then rose to his feet as though nothing had occurred. Ever since Myrtle the Bloody had exposed him sneaking into the girls' lavatory, his reputation had plummeted once more. Wherever he went, whispers and stares followed him relentlessly. Lately, however, Professor Lockhart seemed somewhat different. He'd grown far quieter, no longer flaunting his usual ostentatious mannerisms. More precisely, he'd stopped flashing that signature smirk. His robes, too, had shifted from garish green and pink to a far more subdued gray. Liz had just finished teaching a defense against the dark arts class to first years. Once she'd packed up, she stepped out of the classroom. With no afternoon lessons scheduled, she'd arranged to meet Professor McGonagall later at Hogsmeade for a drink. Stepping outside, Liz's brows instinctively furrowed. She'd spotted Lockhart. That man was undeniably insufferable, especially to someone like Liz, who valued her independence. Whenever he saw her, he'd cling on like glue, utterly unbearable, and yet brimming with self-conceit. This time, though, things seemed different. After mustering the courage to greet him, she watched as he merely smiled, gave a brief nod, and promptly walked away. A bit curious, Liz recalled the rumors regarding his spying in the girls' lavatory. She assumed this sudden restraint stemmed from a shred of modesty. He simply felt too ashamed to bother her now. Good, she thought, relieved. At least I won't have to fend him off anymore. Yet, the instant Lockhart turned away, Liz, a former professional assassin, immediately sensed something amiss. At first glance, she couldn't locate his wand anywhere. Then, she noticed a subtle bulge within his right sleeve. Her eyes narrowed. This wasn't the clumsy behavior typical of Lockhart. He'd always kept his wand in plain sight. Moreover, she sensed a stark difference about him now. If the old Lockhart resembled a meek lamb, this new version felt like a ravenous wolf. Had someone used Polyjuice Potion to impersonate him? Still, Liz chose not to act rashly. It remained mere intuition. No concrete proof existed. Making unfounded accusations could prove disastrous. If wrong, it'd be deeply embarrassing. Watching Lockhart's retreating figure, Liz vowed to keep a close eye on him. Mom, what's wrong? Is Lockhart harassing you again? I'll go speak to Professor Dumbledore at once. Xia Ji, voice rang out behind her. No. I merely find him a bit peculiar today, Liz replied, slightly hesitant. Oh, Mom, what did you notice? Xia Ji, eyes sparkled with curiosity. Never mind, it's probably nothing. Just my imagination. Liz herself remained uncertain. Xia Ji led her to a secluded corner, then whispered conspiratorially, Professor Dumbledore also senses something off about him. He's currently under surveillance, but lacks evidence. What exactly seems odd to you? Well, previously, he was utterly inept, yet now he radiates the demeanor of a dueling master, an expert, in fact. You see, such experts exhibit distinct habits, where they conceal their wands, hand placements, even their gait. Based on my observations, this Lockhart is undeniably a master now. Liz, of course, shared everything with her son. Excellent. This information will prove invaluable to Professor Dumbledore. Xia Ji grabbed her hand, urging her toward the headmaster's office. Wait, slow down. You'll make me fall. Despite her protests, Liz had no chance against her son's strength. She reached the 8th floor without breaking a sweat, though. Is this truly so important? She asked, still uncertain. Absolutely. It's crucial intelligence. Xia Ji replied. What exactly are you two investigating? May I know? Liz realized her son had once again become entangled in one of Dumbledore's schemes. Share what you've observed with Professor Dumbledore. I'm certain he'll enlighten you, Xia Ji assured her. Lemon drops. The stone creature leapt aside. Dumbledore appeared puzzled upon seeing Xia Ji escorting Liz into his office. Professor Liz, how may I assist you? He inquired with a warm smile. Oh, well, I encountered Professor Lockhart earlier and sensed something amiss. Though it may well be my imagination, Xia Ji insisted this detail would interest you, so he brought me here, Liz explained. 2 chairs materialized before Dumbledore's desk. Liz and Xia Ji took seats, and she began detailing her observations regarding Lockhart's odd behavior. Initially, She'd expected Dumbledore to dismiss her as overly paranoid, yet his expression gradually turned grave. Evidently, her observations held genuine significance. Professor Lockhart seems transformed. Yes, that seems plausible, Dumbledore mused. Is this truly important? Liz pressed. Extremely so. Thank you, Professor Liz. I knew appointing you as a faculty member was the right decision. Dumbledore beamed. May I inquire what's transpiring? Liz asked. With Xiaji already involved, she wished to remain informed for his safety. Oh, certainly. You'll undoubtedly aid us, Dumbledore replied, then recounted the diary's tale. Thus, Lockhart's teaching prowess improved after finding the diary. His current transformation stems from... Liz trailed off. Precisely. He's now under the control of that fragmented soul, Xiaji affirmed. A soul fragment commanding a physical body grants it free access throughout Hogwarts, a deeply troubling prospect, Liz noted. Indeed, now it acts with impunity, Dumbledore remarked, smiling. Professor, why do you seem unfazed? Liz questioned. We anticipated this outcome. He'd inevitably act thus. He could manifest physically, yet lacked his own body, Xiaji explained. Professor, we may apprehend him now, he added. Tomorrow's Wednesday, Dumbledore winked. You foretold he'd open the chamber that night. Xiaji fell silent. Dumbledore refused to alter this foretold future. Unplanned actions might unravel fate itself. Very well, as you wish, Xiaji nodded, then turned to devour a small cake. Unseen by all, his lips curved ever so slightly upward. Everything remained exactly as he'd planned.